the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. This is section 2 video for the textured triangle shawl knit along that is sponsored by Red Heart. In this video, I will show you how to do section 2 of the pattern, and I have also written out line by line instructions which can be found on my blog, and the link to that is in the video description box right down there below. If you go down there, you can find the link, and while you're down there, please smash that like button, as my kids say, so that other people know you enjoyed this video. Speaking of the line by line instructions, why don't we take a look at those really quickly? As you take a look down here, you can see I have the actual pattern from Red Heart right here. And I have the line by line instructions, which might look a little bit different than what I showed you in video 1. Now, the difference here is that there are 2 sets of tables, and I'm going to explain to you why that is. It has been brought to my attention that in video 1, I changed up where you put your last increase at the end of the row. Instead of placing your increase on the 3rd stitch from the end, I had you place it in the 2nd stitch from the end. For a full explanation of why I did that, I actually did a question and answer for section 1 on Facebook Live, and I've posted it here on YouTube. So if you're interested for the reasoning why, please go check out that video. I won't bore you with that information here. But what I've done to the line by line instructions since the first video is I have the first set of instructions over here to the left are just like the instructions I showed you in video 1, only now you will see it says as written in the pattern. What that means is all the instructions you see on the left side are written precisely the way it's written in the pattern, where you knit to the last 3 stitches, knit front and back, and then knit 2. On the right side, on the table over here on the right, you'll notice that it says as taught in the video. All that means is that over here on all of the right side rows over here, I have you knit to the last 2 stitches, do a knit front and back, and knit 1. That's it. It's a really simple, subtle little change that I didn't think was important to point out in video 1, but hindsight is 20/20, and I apologize. I have corrected it. I've put out a video trying to explain what I did, and I've updated the line by line instructions. So no matter which one you follow, whether it's the pattern as written to the last 3 stitches or the pattern with the slight alteration to the last 2 stitches, you still get this remarkable shawl. You'll still get the same results. The important thing here is that you're consistent. So whichever one you chose to do for section 1, just continue doing that for the rest of the pattern, okay? So that's the first thing I want to point out. The second thing I want to point out is that it was pointed out to me again that a couple times I kept saying knit 2 together when we got to the center spine stitch, and really all I meant was knit 2. It's written in the pattern, and no matter what version or form you want to look at, you really just knit 2, but I think I get in a habit, and it's just the slip of tongue. When I get to knit 2, I automatically add the and together, but you don't do that. It's still just knit 2. I think many of you already know that, but I did want to point that out. If you come across it and you're just like, what's going on? That's all. It was just a slip of the tongue. All of that information, all those little subtle corrections for video 1, I put in the video description box of video 1. I've updated the blog, and all the information is there, including the extra video if you want to check it out. It's not that big of a deal, but I wanted to make sure that I did point it all out for you, and apologize for the mishap, but it is what it is, and everything is going to be okay because you're still going to be successful because you still have the line by line instructions along the way. So by this point in the knit along, you have completed section 1, and I know many of you have completed section 1. I'm part of the Facebook group, and there are some people who've actually gone beyond section 1, and I know of one woman who's actually already finished the shawl. She just couldn't put it down. She loved working with the Red Heart Soft Essentials and the big needles, and it just went so fast, and she's an established knitter, so she just kept on going. But those of you who are following along with the actual knit along during the time frame of the knit along, you should be have section 1 completed and ready to start section 2. So that's where we are going to pick up today. We will look at the line by line instructions. I will show you the vital information you need to know for section 2, and then you will be left to carry on to complete section 2 and get to section 3 before the next video is released. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and download the section 2 line by line instructions. Again, the instructions are on my blog post, which is available in the link down there below. Just go check it out right in the video description box. And while I'm mentioning the video description box, if there is ever any sort of mishap or extra information that I need to give, I will always put it in the video description box. So if there's ever a doubt, always check down there and check it all out. It will give you a quick reminder of all the details you need. Okay, so grab the line by line instructions and your section 1 and join me back here. Let's begin this section by taking a peek at the line by line instructions. I'm going to start off by looking at the very first page. This is what you should have looked at when you completed section 1. And again, on the left side, that follows the pattern exactly as written. On the right side, that follows the pattern as I mentioned in the video where I had you move the last increase. I'm going to go ahead and move this first page, which gets us to the second page. And the reason I want to go to the second page is because section 2 actually begins at the bottom of this page. And you'll see, no matter which side you follow, they're identical with the exception of the way the right side rows are made, okay? So just so you know, and I want to reiterate, either pattern is correct. You can do one way or the other. It doesn't really make a difference one way or the other. But for teaching ease, I prefer this side, but it doesn't really matter, okay? So we're going to continue on and we're going to follow along with the line by line instructions. You'll see here to begin with that row 33 is a wrong side row. So when you pick up your work, you should be on a wrong side row, ready to work into some purl stitches. Let's continue on and look at these here. And it says that we are going to knit to our marker, slip our marker, purl 2, slip our marker, knit to the end. Well, wait a minute, if we're on a wrong side row, that means we're looking at purls. And this whole time up to now, we have been purling our purls, correct? What's going to happen is we are creating a garter stitch row. And you'll see that over here on the side, I put that it says it creates a garter stitch row. By putting knits on top of those purls to our marker, we are creating garter stitch on the opposite side, on the right side of our fabric. When we get to our marker, we want to maintain the center spine stitches in stockinette, so that's why you will purl those 2 stitches. Then once you slip your marker, you will then knit on the other side of your fabric. So on the wrong side of your fabric for row 33, we will actually be knitting all of the stitches with the exception of the 2 center spine stitches. So what that ends up looking like is this. I've gone ahead and I have actually completed through row 36, okay? So through row 36, I'll move this out of the way to make it easier to see. I started off with my knit stitches just like normal, and then by placing my knits on the opposite side, it created these purl bumps on my right side. Can you see that? So when I'm looking at the wrong side of my work, even though I was looking at these purl bumps, I knit all of these stitches all the way to my marker. And then when I got to my marker, I made sure that I purled those 2 stitches. See how that maintains the stockinette? See how it maintains the stockinette? And then when I slip my marker over here, I knit all the way back over here. So that's what I did for row 33 and row 35. Row 34 and 36 are right side rows, and they're just like the right side rows you've been doing all along. So what you do on your right side row, let's do a little refresher. You increase at the start of your row, you work your stitches all the way to the center, and you increase on either side of your markers at center, and then you work all the way down here to the end of the row, and you increase here at the end of the row. So every right side row of your shawl from here to the end, you will do increases at the beginning, 2 at the middle, and 1 at the end. Okay, that is consistent across all of the different versions of the pattern, okay? It's the same thing. That's why I am telling you that the way the pattern's written and the way I showed you in the video is exactly the same, because we're still creating those stitches in the same points that we want to. I just moved the stitch over by 1, okay? So for row 34 and 36, we did our right side rows just like we've been doing. And that takes us to row 37 where all the action happens, okay? So let's look at the sample really quickly. As I pull in the actual sample, let's look at it as if we were knitting on it. This is the work we just completed in section 1, and this is where section 2 begins. So you can see our 2 rows of garter stitch right there. And then we're going to jump in to some lace stitches. This little bit, this little section right here is our repeat. And so what will happen is we will work this amount, and then we'll repeat this bit right there and right there. And then we repeat this bit all the way down here at the end. So I just need to show you how to do these 2 rows to create this lace, and you can create this whole section yourself because you already know all these stitches. But what's really cool is that as most of you are learning lace for the first time, I am going to talk you through a couple of little tips and tricks that I use to make my lace stitches look better when I'm working them on the wrong side. Let's talk about doing our lace rows on the wrong side of the fabric. This is a really brilliant thing that Diane Moyer did, the designer, by placing the lace stitches on the wrong side of the fabric, because it makes it easier for you, the knitter, to not get confused between actual lace stitches where we do a yarn over coupled with a decrease, and the increase stitches that we do when we do a knit front and back, 2 yarn overs, and a knit front and back. We do those 4 increase stitches on the right side, correct? I think I've said that like 7 times now. But when we're on the wrong side, typically we don't do any increases. We don't do any shaping. We just are knitting and we're purling. What's going to change here is on row 37, we are not only going to be knitting and purling, we are going to be doing a yarn over. And to make sure that we aren't increasing stitches, we have to couple that yarn over with a decrease. Because we're on the wrong side of the fabric, we are going to use a purl 2 together decrease. If we were on the right side of the fabric, we could use a knit 2 together decrease. Does that make sense? When you are creating lace, you are essentially creating holes in your knitting, and we want to control the number of stitches that we get at the same time we get those holes. So as we're doing our increases down the center spine of our shawl, okay? So as we're doing these decreases down the center spine of our shawl, we're creating these great holes, correct? But we are not coupling those increases with the decrease, so we actually get an increased stitch. We don't just get a lace stitch. But in order to create the beautiful lace stitches in the middle of the shawl without increasing our stitches, we have to do a decrease. Okay, so here we go. Let's jump in and get our line by line and get to row 37. Remember, you're supposed to view these videos as if it is a class with me. That's why I'm taking so much time to try and explain the way this works so that you can better understand how lace stitches work. And when you jump into lace stitches beyond what you're doing in this knit along, you will have no fear and you'll have a lot of knowledge, mucho knowledge. Okay, so here we go. I am on row 37 of my line by line instructions, and you'll notice I also made those in a different color, so it's another big kind of bullseye clue for you to say, oh, I'm doing something special on that row. It's a different color. What am I doing? And here we are. So we are on the wrong side, which is perfect, and we know that because we have our purl stitches over here, but we also know because remember we have that marker. I still have my marker in my work, and I'm on the purl side of my fabric. So here we go. Are you ready? We're going to jump into row 37. We begin row 37 with a knit 2. So I will knit 1 and knit 2. Now I need to purl 1. My yarn is in back, so I want to bring it between my needles forward. Now I will purl this 1 stitch. Okay? Now I have 2 knits and 1 purl. The next part of the instructions say we need to do a yarn over and a purl 2 together. And you'll notice that that part of the instructions are in brackets. Those brackets indicate that everything that's inside of those, you will be doing a multiple of times, okay? So it like puts them in a collection. So our bracket is a yarn over, purl 2 together. Well, we've been doing yarn overs this whole time down the center spine, correct? And when we do those yarn overs, our yarn is usually in back. We bring our yarn between our needles and then lay it over top of our right hand needle. That works with the only thing we have to add to that is we have to bring our yarn back between the needles so that it's back in a position for purling. See how that literally wraps the right hand needle completely with one full stitch? Okay, so you can actually create your yarn over just like that. However, by doing your yarn over in this way, we are creating extra fabric simply by having to have our yarn go over top and back around and really completely circling that needle. So what I want you to do is when you're doing a yarn over as if to, and then your next stitch is a purl or a purl two together in this case, this is what I want you to do. Are you ready? I want you to bring your yarn to the back and lay it over top of your right hand needle back to the front. You see that? You see that little yarn right there? That now is our yarn over. And so once you do that, you would go to the next stitch, which is it's going to be a purl or a purl two together, okay? So when you use this yarn over, your next stitch that you will be working is in the purl family. For this pattern, we need to do a purl two together. So what we will do is take our right hand needle, go into both of those stitches, go into the front leg of both of those stitches, yarn over, and see how it looks funny? It looks like that yarn over is falling away, but it's not, because I'm going to watch this. I've yarned over, I'm popping that needle through those two stitches, and see my yarn over is right there, and my new stitch is right next to it. So when I come off, I have this yarn over. Okay, so that was a yarn over and a purl two together. Let's do that again. So we need to do another yarn over, and our next stitch is in the purl family. We're going to do a purl two together. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the back and bring it back forward up over top of my right hand needle. And then I'm going to go into my purl two together, purl them together. Even though that looks like that's disappearing, it's still there. As long as when you come through that stitch, you see that? When you come through, make sure that yarn over is still there. Let those stitches fall off, and there you go. Here's what's interesting. Those of you who are beginner knitters and you're like, oh my gosh, this is my first knit along, I'm so nervous. I want to give you a big hand up, okay? You ready? You already know how to do this because you have probably accidentally done this increase when you first learned to purl. Notice what we're doing here. When we want to do a yarn over and our next stitch is the purl, if we have our yarn in back, okay, and we go in to do our purl two together, and we see how we haven't moved our yarn forward like we typically would when we purl, and now we come up and we purl, check this out. Oh my gosh, we have that yarn over and we have an increased stitch. So for many of you, when you learned to do ribbing and you went from a knit stitch to a purl stitch, from a knit stitch to a purl stitch, and you forgot to move your yarn between your needles, you got that yarn over on accident. All we're doing here is we're doing it on purpose, okay? So we're bringing our yarn to the back, purl two together, and look at this. When we come out of our purl two together, we actually get that yarn over right there. You see that? You see how you already know how to do this? We're just doing it on purpose this time. We have our yarn in back and we are creating a purl two together right next to it. And simply by having our yarn in back and then completing our purl two together, we are creating that yarn over. Now, I'm going to reiterate what the point is of doing the yarn over in this way. It makes it so that the actual yarn over stitch has less fabric on it, less yarn to create the yarn over, which means when we come back on our right side row and work our stitches, our holes are not going to be massively huge. They're going to be proportionate to the size of our spine yarn overs, okay? It's going to look better. The other thing is, by doing our yarn overs this way, when we come back on our right side row, our yarn overs are going to be laying on our needle backwards. So I want to make sure I show you how to work into those. So I'm going to get to my marker, and then I'm going to purl two stitches, and let's do the other side. So let's get to our marker. I'm to the last 2 stitches before my marker, and it's time for me to do my yarn over and purl 2 together. And I want to point out something. When I do this purl 2 together, I will not only be going into a stitch, but I will be going into a yarn over that was created on my right side row. So all I do is make sure my yarn is in back, and when I go into the stitch, make sure that I go into that yarn over as well so that I get that decrease. And I simply purl those 2 together. Okay, purl them together and off. Now I will slip my marker and I will purl these 2 stitches. So no yarn over or anything because I'm on my wrong side, so I don't want to do an increase. Slip my marker and I'm over to this side. Now, remember when I was talking about how the 2 sides of the fabric mirror each other, and this is a prime example of where this comes into play. On this side of the fabric, when we were working towards our marker, our repeat was the yarn over, knit 2 together, correct? When we slip our marker and we're working on this side of the fabric or this side of the shawl, we are going to do a purl 2 together and then yarn over. Okay, so it's just that opposite. We've got to do purl 2 together, yarn over. Over here it was yarn over, purl 2 together. Over here it's purl 2 together, yarn over. So as I slip my marker, I will jump in automatically with my purl 2 together, and remember, and see, there's my yarn over from the previous row, and I want to make sure I get into that, and I simply purl those 2 together, and then I yarn over. So I bring my yarn to the back, and now it's time to purl 2 together. Purl 2 together. Yarn to the back, and then purl 2 together. I will do this all the way up to the last 3 stitches. Why don't you get up to the last 3 stitches and let's take a look at what we need to do there. I'm to my last 3 stitches, and I want to point out that you need to make sure that you end with a final yarn over, because remember our repeat is purl 2 together, yarn over. Okay, so it's really easy to forget that last yarn over. And then you need to do a purl 1 because we started off this way, correct? We'll do a purl 1 and then we knit 2. And we started off with a knit 2, purl 1. You see how that works out? So that's how everything is symmetrical. So here we are, we're at the end of our row. We have done all of these yarn overs and we've coupled them with the purl 2 togethers. So our stitch count has not changed, but now we have a bunch of holes in our work. As I mentioned earlier, because of the way I taught you how to do the yarn over when you're working with a purl in the next stitch or a purl 2 together, I'm going to call that the purl family. When we turn our work and we come back the opposite direction, our yarn overs are going to be laying on our needles backwards. They're really easy to fix, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm turning my work and I'm getting ready to start row 38, and row 38 is a right side row, which means it is completed just like you've been doing all of your other right side rows. So make sure you do that. The difference here is that we are going to work into our yarn overs slightly different because they're laying on our needles differently. So on row 38, we begin with a knit 1, and then we go into our knit front and back, just like we've been doing all along. Now we would carry on and we will knit to our marker so that we can do an increase when we get down here to our marker. So let's start doing that. I will knit 1 stitch, and I'm already to my yarn over. Can you see how it's just resting on my needle there? So it's resting on my needle in such a way that it looks like the back leg is stepping forward as compared to the front leg, correct? So if I were to knit this stitch as I typically would a knit, I would go into this leg, correct? That's where I'd want to go. But if I do that, not only is it difficult to get into, but when I do that and I take it off, see how that gives that stitch a twist right there? That's what creates twisted stitches. So we don't want that, okay? We don't want that to happen. So what we want to happen here is we want to knit in the leg that's the easiest to get into. We want the leg that's stepping forward, and that would be the back leg. So all you do, this is so easy, all you do is this. You go into the stitch, grab your yarn, and knit into that stitch and off. It's that easy, okay? So I will knit the next stitch. Let's get to the yarn over. We're to our yarn over. You can see it's laying on there differently. The back leg wants to be knit. So I'm going to go into the stitch and yarn over and come out. Isn't that easy? Such an easy fix. Knit the next stitch. There's my yarn over, in, around, and out. Okay, this also works for those of you who are accidentally purling and having your stitches lay on your needle where they look like this, where the back leg is forward. You can also knit those through the back leg and it corrects the stitch as well. Now, what if you're going along and you realize that you have forgotten a yarn over? Because we know that it's supposed to go a yarn over, purl two together, yarn over, purl two together. So as we're knitting back, it would be knitting into a stitch, knitting into a yarn over, knitting into a stitch, knitting into a yarn over, correct? So if you're going along and all of a sudden you realize that you have worked into 2 stitches back to back, that means you forgot a yarn over between those stitches. So let's pretend I've done that, okay? So here I am, I'm to a point in my work where I just knit into a stitch, and I'm getting ready to go into the next one, and oh, it should be a yarn over, but it's not. It's an actual knit stitch. I don't have to go and tink back and rip out my work. All I need to do is this. Take my left hand needle, and do you see that string right there? It's the actual string that is attached to this stitch that's on my left hand needle, and it's attached to the stitch I just knit into on my right hand needle. So it's attached to the mother of this stitch. If this is the daughter, here's the mother. You see that? That string that I have on my finger there is the actual string that would be your yarn over. So we want to pick up that string and put it back on our needle. So what you could do is you could take your left hand needle and going from behind, you could take it and scoop it up like this. And now that yarn over is resting on your needle just like your other yarn overs are. So if it's like that, you would knit it through the back leg, okay? Or you could take your left hand needle, come into the front and scoop it up from the front. And now it's resting on there as if a normal stitch would be. So we would knit it through the front leg. See how the front leg is stepping forward? It's like, knit me, I'm ready to go. Whereas if we tried to go through the back leg, we would have a hard time and it would twist a stitch. You see how that works? So if you get to a point in your knitting where you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to do a yarn over, simply take your left hand needle, scoop up that string between the stitches, and now you have your yarn over in place. You simply knit it like you would, and you would carry on. So now you know how to add a yarn over if you forget one. You will work in this pattern. We're just knitting all the way down to our marker, which is exactly what we have done on all of the other right side rows you have done from the beginning of this shawl. When we get to our marker, we will once again work our yarn over increase. And because our yarn over increase is going into a stitch that is next to a knit stitch, we will go back to the way we did our yarn overs, the way you've been doing them all along. So let me get down there to the marker so that you can be reminded one more time how to do that yarn over. I don't want you to get confused. Remember, the yarn over I showed you on the wrong side is the way you would do it if your next stitch is part of the purl family. But the yarn over you would do on the right side is the exact same way you've been doing it all this time. And what's really great is both ways create a little amount of fabric so that you don't get super huge holes, and the yarn overs, whether on the knit side or the right side, when you do them the way I showed you, are consistent. They are the same size. One is not going to be bigger than the other, so it just makes more uniform stitches. Okay, so I'm almost down here to the marker. There we are. Almost. I thought I was there. So close. Okay, so I can see my marker right here, and just like before, I want to do my yarn over, right? So I am going to bring my yarn between my needles and then just lay it right over top of my right hand needle, slip my marker, knit the next 2 stitches. So knit 1 and knit 2, slip my marker, and then I carry on just knitting to the end of my row, and then I'll do my increase at the end of this row. Okay, you see how that works? Remember that when you are on the right side rows throughout the course of this shawl, you are increasing at 4 points. You are increasing at the beginning, you are increasing 1 stitch before the marker, 1 stitch after the marker, and then increasing at the end. So there's 4 increases on every right side row. On the wrong side rows, the stitches alternate between doing just purl, so you get stockinette, doing knits so that you get a garter stitch, or doing the lace, which now you know how to do, right? You absolutely know how to do this lace stitch, which is really cool, right? Isn't that awesome? It's just the basic combination of an increase and a decrease and doing those yarn overs to get the hole that you have created lace. You are now a lace knitter. Can you believe that? How super cool is that? So here's what you need to do now. We have already learned all the stitches you need to do to get to the end of section 2. So let's take a look at our line by line. We have finished row 37, which is highlighted in yellow or written in yellow, which was our lace row, okay? So that's your big trigger of, okay, that's a lace row. And then I just showed you on row 38 where you are doing the same right side row you have always been doing, and you're working into your yarn overs through the leg that wants to be knit, okay? So whether you did the yarn over the way I showed you to do it for a purl, or if you're like, no, I'm gonna do it another way because I know how to do it, always did it through the leg that wants to be knit, okay? You can see here that it says to carry on and repeat rows 35 through 38 2 more times. What that will do, and we can simply see it by looking at the color of the row, we are creating 2 more sections of lace. Perfect, we know how to do that. We've already done that. So we're creating 2 more sections of lace. Once you've created those 2 extra sections of lace, and they're divided up by garter stitches, see, you can see right here, there's a garter stitch row between each of the lace sections, you then repeat row 33 through 35, which gives you back-to-back garter stitch sections, okay? So all of this is what section 2 is, and it's really not that difficult. You know how to do everything. I just taught you everything you need to do, and I know that you'll complete this in no time. Let's take a look on the actual sample, what it is, one more time so you can see how it's all gonna look, especially now that you know how to create these stitches. So if we were looking in this direction, this would be rows 33 through 35. We create these 2 rows of garter stitch. Then we have right here, this is row 35 through 38 where you get the lace, right? You get this lace bit. And then here's a garter stitch edge, which would be row 39. And then we get lace again, and then we get garter stitch, and we get lace again, and then we're back to the 2 rows of garter stitch. So this little section right here, this little eensy beensy section is what you need to complete for section 2. And if you're following along with the knit along, that's what you have a whole week to complete. And you'll get it done in no time. It's really that easy. So what have we learned in this video today? We have learned that if we put knits on a purl side of the fabric, it creates garter stitch on the wrong side, which is great. We have learned that we are doing increases on every right side row. We already knew that, but we reiterated that fact. And we're doing those increases at 4 points at the beginning, 2 in the middle, and 1 at the end. And we have also learned how to do lace. And lace is created by coupling up a yarn over and a decrease. The decrease we used was a purl 2 together. Last but not least, we learned a little bit of a technical tip, right? That's the way we're going to call it, on how to do a yarn over when your next stitch is part of the purl family. So that way your work will actually look a little bit more uniform and a little bit better. So hopefully all of that together is exciting for you and you're feeling accomplished and you're really feeling like you're learning something big. I am loving seeing all of the progress in the Facebook group. If you're not part of the Facebook group, please make sure as you share your progress on social media, you use hashtag MarleyBirdKal so that way I can find you and give you a big thumbs up on my end to let you know that I'm watching you and that I am really enjoying your success. Hopefully you guys have no trouble with this. If you do, don't hesitate to leave me a comment below. Leave me suggestions and all that good stuff. And until next week, I will catch you guys later. Make sure you tune back in for section 3. If you want to be the first one to know when the video is released, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. And once you've subscribed, there is a bell right next to the subscribe button. If you click on that, that is an indicator to let YouTube know that you want to know immediately when I release a video. So you could be the first to know when the next knit along video is released. Don't forget the line by line instructions are on on my blog, which is marleybird.com. Again, the link and all the information you ever need in these videos is in the video description below or can be found on the blog. I hope you're having fun, and I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and this is the Texture Triangle Shawl Knit Along. Bye guys.